The planet had no name. Not anymore. It drifted at the edge of mapped space, hidden beyond a dead cluster of stars where even light seemed reluctant to travel. Ancient records referred to it only in fragments, warnings buried in forgotten databases, corrupted logs that ended mid-sentence, and star charts deliberately erased by civilizations long extinct. To most of the galaxy, it did not exist. But the Ziran Dominion had found it. And the Zirans did not ignore discoveries. From the bridge of the warship Oblivion Spear, Supreme Commander Vale Kor stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the silent world rotate beneath them. His armor reflected the dim light of distant stars, etched with the sigils of 1,000 conquered systems. "Confirm the readings," Vale said, his voice calm, controlled. A cluster of officers worked at their stations, their movements sharp with tension. One of them turned, hesitation flickering across his otherwise disciplined expression. "Confirmed, Commander. The energy signature is unlike anything recorded. It's massive. Stable." Then, he paused. "And what?" Vale asked. "Alive." A faint murmur rippled across the bridge. Vale's gaze sharpened, locking onto the planet below. "Define alive." "Biological, sir. But not in any conventional sense. It's as if the entire energy field originates from a single organism. Something buried deep beneath the surface." Another officer interjected, voice tight. "We've cross-referenced the signal with archival myths, pre-expansion era. There are similarities." Vale's lip curled slightly. "Myths are stories told by the weak to explain what they cannot conquer." "Yes, Commander," the officer replied quickly. "But these particular myths, they were shared across multiple species. Civilizations that never had contact." Vale turned slowly. "That is not coincidence," he said. The bridge fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the warship's engines and the faint crackle of energy shields brushing against cosmic debris. Vale stepped closer to the viewport. The planet was gray, lifeless at first glance. Vast stretches of ash-covered terrain stretched endlessly, broken only by jagged ridges and deep, unnatural fissures. No oceans. No vegetation. No movement. And yet, "There is something down there," Vale murmured. The sensors confirmed it. A single point of origin, buried miles beneath the crust, radiating a power signature so immense it distorted nearby readings. It wasn't fluctuating like a reactor or pulsing like a star. It was breathing, slow, measured, ancient. Vale straightened. "Prepare a landing team." A few officers hesitated. "Commander," one said carefully, "we recommend remote observation first. If the entity is as powerful as the readings suggest." Vale raised a hand. "Silence. We are the Ziran Dominion," he said evenly. "There is nothing in this galaxy we observe from a distance out of fear." The officer lowered his gaze. "Of course, Commander. Deploy ground forces. Establish a perimeter around the signal source. I want full containment protocols ready before we wake whatever this is." "Wake it?" another officer asked, unable to hide the unease in his voice. Vale allowed himself a faint, cold smile. "If it is alive," he said, "then it can be controlled." The descent was smooth. Black dropships pierced the planet's thin atmosphere, their engines leaving streaks of blue fire against the dull gray sky. As they approached the surface, the silence became oppressive. No wind, no storms, not even the faintest tremor of tectonic activity. It was as if the planet itself held its breath. The landing zone was chosen near the epicenter of the energy signal, a massive depression in the ground, visible even from orbit. A crater, but not one formed by impact. This one looked carved. The first squad stepped out. Their armored boots crunched against the brittle surface, sending echoes across the empty landscape. Scanners flickered as they swept the area, projecting holographic readings into the air. "No atmospheric toxins," one soldier reported. "No radiation spikes. Environment is stable." "Too stable," another muttered. "Maintain formation," the squad leader snapped. Above them, additional dropships descended, unloading heavy machinery, containment pylons, energy stabilizers, and mobile command units. Within minutes, the crater's edge was surrounded. Commander Vale arrived shortly after. He stepped onto the surface without hesitation, his presence immediately commanding attention. Soldiers straightened as he passed, their unease hidden behind discipline. "Report," Vale said. The lead scientist approached, holding a tablet filled with rapidly shifting data. "The signal is directly below us, Commander. Approximately 3 kilometers down. But we've detected structural anomalies beneath the surface." "Explain." The scientist swallowed. "There are cavities. Massive ones. Hollow spaces surrounding the core of the signal." Vale frowned. "Natural formations? I don't believe so." Vale looked toward the center of the crater. "Excavate," he ordered. It took less than an hour. Ziran technology tore through the planet's crust with precision, displacing layers of ancient rock as if they were nothing more than dust. The deeper they went, the more the readings intensified. And then, "Commander," a voice called out, strained. "You need to see this." Vale stepped forward as the final layer was cleared. At first, it didn't make sense. The shape, the scale, it was too large for the mind to process. Then his vision adjusted. And he saw it. Feels. Each one the size of a warship, layered across an immense, unmoving form. The curvature of something vast. Something that stretched far beyond the limits of the excavation. A wing. Folded. Dormant. The ground beneath them shifted slightly. Not from machinery. But from something deeper. Something alive. A low, rhythmic tremor echoed through the crater. One of the soldiers whispered, "That's a heartbeat." Vale said nothing. He stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the colossal form before him. "A dragon," the scientist breathed. The word felt wrong. Too small. Too simple. Because this wasn't just a creature. It was a presence. Ancient beyond comprehension. And it was sleeping. Vale's expression hardened. "Set up the containment grid," he ordered quietly. Behind him, the soldiers hesitated. For the first time since their arrival, fear crept into the ranks of the Ziran Dominion. But no one dared question the command. Above them, the sky darkened slightly. And far below, something shifted. Not awake. Not yet. But aware. The Zirans moved with precision. Fear did not slow them, only sharpen them. Within minutes of the discovery, the crater transformed into a fortress of technology. Towering pylons were driven deep into the ground in a perfect circular formation around the buried entity. Each one hummed with compressed energy capable of stabilizing collapsing stars or imprisoning supernova fragments. To the Ziran Dominion, this was routine. Nothing was beyond containment. At least, that's what they believed. Commander Vale Corps stood at the center platform, overlooking the excavation site. Below him, the exposed portion of the dragon's body lay still, its scales dark and ancient, reflecting no light, as if they absorbed reality itself. "Grid alignment at 98%, an engineer reported. "Final calibration underway." Vale didn't respond immediately. He was watching the creature. Even motionless, it felt wrong. Not like an animal. Not like a weapon. It didn't radiate threat. It radiated certainty. As if it knew something they didn't. "Commander," the engineer prompted. Vale turned slightly. "Proceed." The order echoed through the command channel. "All units, prepare for activation." Across the crater, the pylons flared to life, columns of blinding blue energy shooting skyward before bending inward, forming a dome around the dragon. The air vibrated as the containment field locked into place, sealing the entity beneath layers of controlled force. For a moment, nothing happened. The humming stabilized. Sensors leveled out. The readings became normal. A collective breath seemed to pass through the Ziran forces. "It's working," one of the scientists said, relief creeping into his voice. "The field is holding. Energy output is contained within acceptable parameters." Another added, "We're already siphoning a fraction of its power. Commander, this could redefine." He stopped. Something had changed. It was subtle. So subtle that only the most sensitive instruments detected it at first. A fluctuation. Not in the field. In the creature. Commander, the lead scientist said slowly. We're detecting neural activity. Vale's gaze snapped back to the dragon. That's impossible. It hasn't moved. I know, the scientist whispered. But it's thinking. A silence fell over the crater. The kind of silence that presses against the mind. A single, massive eyelid shifted. It was slow, deliberate, ancient. The eye opened. It was enormous, larger than an entire dropship, and yet impossibly focused. A deep, endless color that no sensor could properly define. It wasn't just looking. It was seeing. Not the soldiers. Not the machines. Everything. Every Xirin on the surface froze. Weapons lowered. Breaths caught. Even the wind, what little there was, seemed to stop. Vale felt it immediately. A pressure. Not physical. Something deeper. As if his thoughts were no longer entirely his own. Hold your positions, he ordered, though his voice was tighter now. The dragon did not move. Did not roar. Did not resist. It simply watched. And then, the world changed. A voice filled the air. Not through sound. Not through comms. Inside them. Inside every mind on the battlefield. Are not the first. Several soldiers collapsed instantly, their bodies hitting the ground with dull, lifeless thuds. Others staggered, clutching their helmets as if trying to block out something that had no direction. Vale dropped to one knee, his vision fracturing for a split second, images flashing across his mind that were not his own. Burning stars. Shattered fleets. Endless darkness. And something watching it all. He forced himself upright. Stabilize the grid, he barked. Increase output, maximum levels. The pylons surged, their energy intensifying as the containment field thickened. The air crackled violently, distorting the space within the dome. But the dragon didn't react. Not to the increased pressure. Not to the energy. It seemed amused. Commander, an officer shouted over the chaos. We're detecting interference from orbit. Vale looked up sharply. Above the planet, the Xirin fleet hung in perfect formation. Hundreds of warships, each one a symbol of absolute dominance. But something was wrong. Their positions were shifting. Not moving. Shifting. Like reflections in disturbed water. Navigation systems are failing, came the panicked report. Star charts are recalibrating without input. We're losing fixed coordinates. That's impossible, Vale snapped. But even as he said it, the stars themselves began to warp. Not explode. Not vanish. But as if space were no longer stable. As if something had reached out and touched the fabric of reality itself. Back on the surface, the dragon's gaze slowly lifted. From the soldiers. To the sky. To the fleet. And the pressure in Vale's mind grew stronger. The voice returned. Heavier this time. Closer. You bind what you do not understand. Another wave hit. More soldiers dropped. Systems across the crater flickered violently, screens filling with impossible data, symbols that no known language could translate, patterns that seemed to rewrite themselves as they were observed. The lead scientist fell to his knees, staring at his readings in horror. This isn't just a biological entity, he said, his voice trembling. The energy, it's not contained. It's ignoring the field. Vale clenched his fists. Nothing ignores Xirin technology. But even as he spoke, one of the pylons behind him flickered. Then another. Not failing. Not breaking. Just dimming. As if the concept of containment itself was losing meaning. The dragon blinked once. Slowly. And the ground trembled beneath them. Not from force. From something awakening. Vale stared into the creature's eye. For the first time in his life, he felt it. Not doubt. Not hesitation. Something colder. Something deeper. Behind him, the containment grid flickered again. And above them, the stars continued to twist. The first mistake had already been made. And the galaxy had just begun to feel the consequences. The universe was no longer behaving correctly. That was the first thing the Xirins realized. Not failing. Not collapsing. Just wrong. Aboard the fleet above the nameless world, instruments spiraled into chaos. Navigation systems recalculated endlessly, unable to anchor themselves to fixed points. Timestamps drifted. Coordinates overlapped. Entire sections of space appeared duplicated, then erased, then rewritten. "Commander, we've lost 3 ships," a voice shouted through the comms. Vale Core looked up from the crater, his expression tightening. "Destroyed?" "No, sir, they're just gone. No debris. No energy spike. It's like they were never there." Below, the dragon remained still. Watching. Waiting. But its presence was no longer contained to the crater. It was everywhere. On the surface, the scientists scrambled to make sense of the impossible. "This isn't interference," the lead researcher said, his voice shaking as streams of data poured across his display. "Our systems aren't being disrupted, they're being rewritten." "By what?" an officer demanded. The scientist hesitated. Then quietly, "By it." A silence followed. The idea was absurd. A creature, no matter how large, how powerful, could not manipulate reality itself. And yet, every reading pointed to the same conclusion. Vale stepped forward, his eyes locked on the dragon. "Explain," he ordered. The scientist swallowed hard. "The energy signature we detected, it's not just biological output. It's structured. Like code. Like a system." "A system?" Vale repeated. "Yes, Commander. It's as if the entity isn't just alive, it's integrated into the fabric of space itself." Vale's gaze darkened. "You're suggesting this creature is controlling reality." "I'm suggesting," the scientist said carefully, "that reality might be responding to it." A sudden scream cut through the air. One of the soldiers collapsed, his body convulsing violently. "Get a medic," someone shouted. But when they reached him, they froze. The soldier wasn't injured. He was staring, eyes wide, unblinking. "What do you see?" the medic asked urgently. The soldier's lips trembled. Then he whispered, "I remember stars that haven't been born yet." The medic recoiled. "What?" "I remember them dying," the soldier continued, his voice hollow. "I remember all of it." His body went still. Gone. Not dead. Not alive. Something else. Vale's jaw tightened. "Contain this," he snapped. "I will not have my forces unraveling from hallucinations." But deep down, he knew this wasn't hallucination. Above, the fleet's distress escalated. "Commander," a voice shouted through the comms. "We're receiving a signal, origin unknown. Patch it through." The bridge of the Oblivion Spear flickered into view on Vale's visor. Officers stood frozen at their stations, staring at a central display filled with shifting, incomprehensible patterns. "It's not a transmission," the communications officer said. "It's memories." "Whose?" Vale demanded. The officer hesitated. "Not ours." The screen shifted. And suddenly, Vale saw it. Not with his eyes. With his mind. Endless void. A darkness so complete it swallowed even the concept of light. And within it, a presence. Not the dragon. Something far older. Far larger. Watching. Stars ignited. Galaxies spiraled into existence. Time began. And the dragon was there. Not as a ruler. Not as a destroyer. As a witness. The vision shattered. Vale staggered, his breath catching. "What was that?" he whispered. The scientist beside him looked pale. "I think," he said slowly, "we're seeing its memory." The realization spread like a virus through the ranks. "This thing," an officer began, "it's older than our civilization." "Older than all known civilizations," the scientist corrected. Vale turned sharply. "How much older?" The scientist hesitated, then spoke the words no one wanted to hear. "Older than this galaxy." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. "That's not possible," Vale said. "I know," the scientist replied. "But the data, Commander, this entity doesn't originate from here. It predates the formation of our star systems. It may even predate space-time as we understand it." Vale's gaze slowly shifted back to the dragon. Still unmoving. still silent, but no longer dormant. Then what is it doing here? He asked quietly. The scientist looked at him. And for the first time, there was no uncertainty in his voice. It's not sleeping, he said. The pause. It's waiting. The ground trembled again. Stronger this time. Cracks spread across the crater floor, glowing faintly with a light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The containment pylons flickered. Not failing. Just irrelevant. Commander, an engineer shouted. The grid isn't responding. It's still active, but it's not interacting with the target. Vale frowned. Explain that. I can't, the engineer snapped. It's like the dragon isn't inside the field anymore. But it hasn't moved. I know. The words hung in the air. Impossible. And yet undeniable. Vale took a slow step forward. Closer to the edge. Closer to the dragon's eye. It shifted slightly. Just enough to meet his gaze again. And in that moment, Vale understood something. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. They hadn't found a creature. They hadn't discovered a weapon. They had stumbled upon something fundamental. Something that existed before rules. Before limits. Before the idea of dominance. The voice returned. So, ancient. Inevitable. You seek to measure what has no end. Vale felt his breath falter. For the first time since he had taken command. He didn't have an answer. Behind him, the fleet continued to fracture. Around him, reality continued to bend. And before him, the dragon waited. Not with patience, but with certainty. Because whatever came next had already happened. The first pylon went dark. No explosion. No overload. It simply ceased. One moment it hummed with enough energy to cage a star. The next, it stood silent, lifeless, as if it had never been activated at all. Pylon 3 offline, an engineer shouted. Then another. Pylon 7, non-responsive. Field integrity dropping. Commander Vale Core turned sharply, his voice cutting through the rising panic. Reroute power. Stabilize the grid immediately. It's not a power issue, the lead engineer yelled back, desperation cracking his composure. The system is functioning, but the field isn't interacting with the target anymore. Vale's eyes narrowed. That's not possible. It's happening. Across the crater, the shimmering dome of the containment field flickered, its once solid structure now unstable, bending inward and outward like a reflection on disturbed water. The dragon had not moved. Not physically. And yet, it was no longer contained. Above the planet, the Ziran Dominion fleet descended into chaos. Commander, we've lost all coordinate locks. Star maps are rewriting in real time. Multiple ships reporting temporal desynchronization. Some are registering events before they happen. Vale activated his comm link. All vessels, disengage and retreat to safe distance. There was no response. Only static. Screams. The feed cut. Back on the surface, the sky began to change. The stars, once distant fixed points of light, started to dim. Not because of clouds. Not because of obstruction. They were disappearing. One by one. As if erased from existence. What is happening? A soldier whispered, lowering his weapon. No one answered. Because no one understood. The dragon's second eye opened. Slowly. Deliberately. The moment it did, everything stopped. The wind. The machines. Even the trembling of the ground. A stillness fell over the world so absolute it felt unnatural, like reality itself was holding its breath. Vale stood frozen, staring up at the colossal being. Both eyes now open. Both fixed on him. And for the first time, the dragon moved. Not with force. Not with speed. But with inevitability. Its body shifted slightly beneath the surface, and the ground above it cracked, not violently, but precisely, as if the planet itself was making room. Stone parted. Massive layers of crust slid aside without resistance. The dragon rose. Not fully. Not completely. Just enough. Just enough to remind the universe of its existence. Its wings unfolded, stretching outward beyond the limits of sight, casting shadows that did not obey light. They didn't block the stars. They replaced them. A soldier dropped his weapon. Another fell to his knees. Some tried to run. None made it far. Not because something stopped them, but because movement itself felt meaningless. Vale forced himself to stand. Every instinct screamed at him to look away, to retreat, to surrender. But he didn't. He couldn't. "I am Commander Vale Corps of the Ziran Dominion," he said, his voice strained but steady. "You will stand down." The words felt small, insignificant. The dragon tilted its head slightly, and the voice returned. Not loud, not overwhelming, but absolute. "You speak as if your will defines existence." Vale clenched his fists. "We command this galaxy." The pause. "But you exist within it." The difference hit him like a blow. Above them, the fleet began to freeze. Warships, massive constructs of steel and energy, hung motionless in orbit, suspended in space like forgotten relics. Weapons systems activated automatically. Targeting locked. Firing sequences initiated. Beams of concentrated energy tore toward the planet. Toward the dragon. They never arrived. Halfway through their descent, the beams unraveled. Not dissipated. Not deflected. Unraveled. As if the concept of their existence had been undone. "What?" an officer whispered. The dragon didn't react. Didn't defend. Didn't attack. It simply existed. And that was enough. The ground beneath Vale gave way slightly, not collapsing, but shifting, realigning itself around something far greater than its own structure. His armor flickered, systems failing one by one. Gravity distorted. Up and down lost meaning. And yet, he remained standing, facing it. "What are you?" he demanded. For a moment, there was silence. Understanding. Not words. Not images. Something deeper. It poured into him, bypassing thought, bypassing language. And he saw, not the dragon, but what it represented. A boundary. Constant. The presence that existed not to rule, but to ensure. To observe. To prevent. The keeper. A witness. A warning. Vale staggered back, his breath shaking. This is impossible." The dragon's gaze softened slightly. Not with kindness. Not with mercy. But with something ancient. Something tired. "You reached beyond your place." Behind Vale, the last of the pylons went dark. The containment grid collapsed completely. Not destroyed. Just irrelevant. The planet trembled, not in fear, but in response. Reality itself seemed to stretch, thin and fragile, around the dragon's presence. Vale looked up at it, his voice barely a whisper now. "Can you be stopped?" The dragon did not answer immediately. Instead, it spread its wings further. Wider. Until the sky itself seemed too small to contain them. "I am not what you fear." The pause. The stars above flickered again. More of them gone now. More of reality unraveling. "I am what comes after." Vale's heart sank. Because in that moment, he understood. The Zirans had not challenged a creature. They had not awakened a beast. They had triggered something far worse. Not destruction. Not war. Correction. And the universe was already beginning to adjust. There was no explosion. No final battle. No last stand worthy of legend. Only silence. The battlefield, once filled with the might of the Ziran Dominion, had become something else entirely. A mate. Ships that once dominated entire star systems now hung frozen in orbit, stripped of motion, stripped of purpose. Their weapons remained half-formed, their systems caught between activation and oblivion. On the surface, soldiers stood where they had fallen. Not dead, not alive, like statues carved from forgotten time. Everything was paused. Everything except one. Commander Vale Corps. He stood alone at the center of the crater, the only being still able to move, still able to think, still able to feel the weight of what was happening. Before him, the dragon. Not rising further. Not attacking. Just watching. Waiting. As if this moment had always been inevitable. Vale took a step forward. His armor flickered weakly, systems barely functional. The ground beneath him no longer felt solid. It shifted subtly with each movement, as though reality itself had lost its structure. "Why?" he asked, his voice raw. The dragon's gaze remained fixed on him. "You sought dominion." Vale swallowed hard. "That is what we are. It is what we've always been." No response. So he continued. "We conquered. We expanded. We survived. That is strength." The dragon's eyes dimmed slightly. Not in anger. In something else. "You mistake survival for understanding." Vale's breath faltered. For the first time, he had no argument. Above them, the last fragments of the Zirin fleet began to fade. Not destroyed. Not consumed. Erased. One ship vanished without sound, its outline dissolving into nothingness, leaving behind no debris, no radiation, no trace it had ever existed. Then another. And another. Vale looked up, his chest tightening. "That's our entire fleet," he whispered. It was. The correction hit harder than any weapon. The ground behind him shifted again. Turned. The crater was gone. No rubble. No excavation. No machines. Just smooth, untouched terrain, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. As if they had never arrived. "No," Vale breathed. He looked at his hands. For a moment, they were solid. But they flickered. Like a broken signal. "What are you doing?" he demanded, panic finally breaking through. "What is this?" The dragon's voice came again. Not louder. Not harsher. Just final. "Restoring balance." Vale staggered back. "By erasing us?" The pause. "But by removing what should not be." The words cut deeper than anything else. Because they carried no hatred. No judgment. Just truth. "I didn't know," Vale said, his voice shaking. "We didn't know what you were." The dragon studied him. And for the first time, there was something almost like recognition in its gaze. "You were not meant to." Vale clenched his fists. "Then why leave this place unguarded? Why let anyone find you at all?" The dragon's wings shifted slightly, stirring a wind that carried no sound. "I was not hidden." The pause. "I was ignored." Vale froze. Because deep down, he understood. The warnings. The erased records. The forgotten maps. This world had never been lost. It had been avoided. By those who knew better. The sky above them began to clear. The distortion fading. The missing stars returning. But something was different now. Subtly. Irreversibly. As if the universe had corrected an error. Vale looked back at the dragon, desperation in his eyes. "Is there anything left of us?" he asked. The dragon did not answer immediately. Its gaze shifted, not just at Vale, but beyond him. Through him. Across time. Across space. "A memory." Vale laughed weakly. A hollow, broken sound. "That's it." No reply. His form flickered again, stronger this time. Pieces of him dissolving at the edges, fading into nothingness. He looked down at himself. At the armor that once symbolized power. At the hands that had commanded armies. At the existence he had always believed unshakable. "We thought we were the strongest," he said quietly. The dragon's gaze remained steady. "You were strong." Vale looked up. A flicker of something, bitterness, relief, or maybe acceptance, crossed his face. Just not enough. The wind returned. So gentle. As if the planet itself exhaled. Vale felt his body unraveling now. No pain, no resistance, just fading. Before the end, he spoke one last time. "Will anyone remember us?" The dragon watched him. And for a brief moment, something ancient softened. "I will." And then, Vale core was gone. Centuries passed. Civilizations rose. Civilizations fell. The galaxy continued its endless cycle of growth and destruction, of ambition and consequence. But in the deepest corners of forgotten space, there were whispers. Stories shared in hushed tones among explorers and outcasts. Of a silent planet. Of a sleeping dragon. Of an empire that vanished without a trace. Some called it myth. Some called it warning. But those who listened closely understood the truth. The universe is not empty. It is watched. And somewhere, beyond maps, beyond memory, something ancient still waits. Not sleeping. Not guarding. Simply remembering.